And we're back, Sonia.
And we are back. I feel like it's been a little while.
It's the Sonia Ryan combo. We're back.
I,
Last one for the year, though, isn't it?
it is. It's kind of bittersweet, but I think today's session is such a cool way to close the actually. So
They've
actually,
got
yeah,
that.
welcome to everyone slowly coming in. I see a few of you already entering, and so it's great to see a lot of people kind of joining us. I think whilst we'll start getting warmed up for the session, I thought
Mm.
we'd start with some housekeeping. Let's just get through that boring bit faster. So, welcome everyone to our last webinar of the year. Today, we're going to be talking about how to get ChatGPT to talk about you, all for the right reasons, though. So before we get into this content, which we're all really excited to cover with you, I just want to go through some quick house rules for everybody. So the session is scheduled for 45 minutes, where we'll have the main content, which will be presented by Liam, who will introduce in just a few minutes. And then we'll dedicate the last 15 minutes of our webinar today for Q&A. So with that being said, I really want to direct everyone to the Q&A box. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in while they're talking, and I will be your moderator today. So any questions you have, I'll say them out loud toward the end of the session. So if you've got anything, please put it in the Q&A. And if you have any how to do that, message me on the chat. Then a couple of things for what we're doing today is we are going to be recording the session, and Liam generously also will be able to have a couple of things to share with us today. So at the end of the session, we'll be able to share the recording and a few really interesting resources for everybody. And the last piece we will also with you is a quick post-webinar survey. It won't take you more than 5 minutes, and we'd really appreciate it if you just took time to give us the feedback. It will help us for the future. So I think that's it.
Mm.
Ryan, Liam, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sonia. And thank you everyone for joining. So Sonia, I think it's fair to say that the one request that we've had over and over and over again was this particular session. There is so much fascination out there right now, so much interest around um, LLMs and products and are LLMs becoming the new Google in that sense? Now, I have to say, I feel like I'm way behind the curve on this one. And I feel like I've been behind the curve on AI generally, but I recently found myself actually using ChatGPT to buy, and I'll tell you what it is because I'm middle-aged and I'm proud of it. I bought a mop and a vacuum combo. And I realized I actually was using ChatGPT for two ways. First, to work out the right brand and then get reviews. And then what ended up happening was more recently, ChatGPT or OpenAI launched their new browser where you can start to buy things from within that particular window. Anyway, this made me realize that I'm way behind the curve. So I'm hugely pleased to be running this session. And just so everyone knows, we're going to be running a lot more of these sessions because what we recognize is in our network at Growth Studio, we've got such incredible entrepreneurs who are doing incredible things who keep us on our toes. But also we want to kind of give them an opportunity to share what they do, but more importantly, how they do it and what you can do as well, really. So that's really the theme of our webinars. And with that, I'd like to introduce Liam Reynolds from Zabora. Liam, how are you?
Not too bad, Ryan. How are you doing?
Yeah, really good. Listen, frame this for us. What are we talking about? When we talk about GEO, what does that actually mean here?
So this is all about really how your brand appears in the AI models like ChatGPT, kind of Claude, Gemini, Perplexity. Um, and obviously the big topic at the moment is, look, how do I get visibility in there? So if someone's searching for something, how do I get my brand or my products to be referenced? But then also people increasingly looking at like sentiment. So like, what does ChatGPT say about me? Is it recommending me, and where do I kind of feature in a rank of 4 or 5 other products that it's mentioning, or am I featuring there at all? I think, as you said, it's becoming increasingly a bit like the new Google, the new kind of frontier, and we call it jokingly like the new battleground for brands. because increasingly people's behavior is changing from like Google search into ChatGPT and LLMs. And for obvious reasons, I think when you look at our own kind of personal behaviors about how much we use it, and I think there's a realization that if you go into Google and you type something in, that the first results you see are going to be all the people paying for those
Yeah.
results. The next set of results tend to be the ones who just got the SEO game kind of better sorted. And actually, often the best results are like way further down the list, but people get too bored to scroll far down. So just give up. So kind of ChatGPT takes a lot of that hard work out for people.
Well, the way that I sort of understood it in my own mind was you're only ever going to get good search results if the tool you're using understands the context. So the more you understand the context, the better your results are going to be. And that's where ChatGPT and the other LLM, we're going to focus on ChatGPT today. That's where it really wins, isn't it? So that's where you can really understand what I'm looking for and therefore give me the right results. It doesn't matter about pages. Those days are kind of over, whether you're on page one or two. It's what does that tool understand? Liam, so as I mentioned earlier, I suspect we're gonna have a lot of questions about this, so I don't want to delay this too much. But in true Growth Studio style, what I'm going to ask you to do is this. Learnings are great, and I think there's going to be a lot of interesting information. I'd love for you to give everyone things they can take away and do, right? So how can we kind of get most of our, or everyone on this call, how can we get them started on this journey to start to rank on ChatGPT? Is that even the right way of saying it? I'm not sure, but how to start to appear in ChatGPT?
Sure. So we've got 10 kind of practical steps that anyone can take and do. And we've done it to focus on like the easier and quickest wins. Like it's quite a complex topic, which we can't go through all of in 30 minutes. And like Wikipedia is a good example of something I've deliberately left out because it's too complicated. You can spend 30 minutes just talking through Wikipedia
Mm.
alone. But like in the deck as we go through it, we've also got some practical examples, which I'll skim through just because of time, but we'll share the deck at the end. So if someone wants to then go back and it's got some practical prompts and things you can drop into ChatGPT to like test how your brand comes up, for instance. And we've also, to add a bit extra value, we developed two pretty useful tools actually, which we will give your users and participants access to. So one is to look at how your homepage comes up and how ChatGPT can interpret and understand your homepage and where the gaps are. And the second
Perfect.
one is this word that I've been struggling with for about 4 or 5 months now, but I think I've mastered it, called canonical.
Nope, you didn't. Try again.
Oh, have a look.
Canonical.
Canonical. Well, I need you to jump in every time that word comes up, and sadly, it's going to come up quite a bit.
That's going to be a great clip to share on LinkedIn, isn't it?
But yeah, there's some specific messaging of how you distill your brand and what you do and who you do it for, why it's important, which the LLMs really like and need to see. So we've got a super useful tool that helps you distill your brand into like a succinct message that you can use. So yeah, at the end, so you have to stay to the end, but we'll share the links to that at the end. So yeah, so hopefully there's some good takeouts. We'll skim through stuff now. But also I'm on hand if people have questions at the end. I'm on hand, or they can reach out and email me.
Perfect. Well, over to you and keep your questions coming in, guys.
Okay, let me just share my screen and I'll jump in. Perfect. And it's a super quick intro to myself. I am a data and marketer by background. I ran my own kind of growth marketing agency for about 7 or 8 years, and then spent the last 4 or 5 years having all sorts of adventures in kind of tech product lands, built out a couple of platforms, and then more recently started Zabora as I think pretty much a world first kind of AEO, GEO, which are the terms for answer engine optimization or generative engine optimization, that kind of consultancy where we just focus on like how to increase brands visibility and sentiment in ChatGPT. And we have a hybrid platform which allows us access to the data. And it's through like working, like we're quite new, but we've already worked with quite a few clients and customers. So it's taking those learnings, which is something I'm going to share with you today. And then in this deck, yeah, we've really got three kind of key like parts to it. Super quick, look, why this is important. Then I'm just going to touch on a little bit of theory about how and where ChatGPT goes to get its answers from. And then the bulk of it is going to be the kind of practical stuff. And you're seeing this that throughout all of it, we're just focusing on ChatGPT. And the reason why it's ChatGPT and not Perplexity, Claude, Gemini, etc., is at the moment ChatGPT has about 80% market share. And it's about 10 times got more market share than the nearest rivals, which are probably Perplexity and Copilot, which sit around about 7% each. So a lot of this stuff is universal, but ChatGPT at the moment is the one to kind of focus on because it's the one that everyone uses. So the starting point really is this new battleground. And I think the kind of realization that we've already touched on this in the intro that customers aren't just searching on Google anymore. And increasingly, they're asking AI for information. And the way they search for stuff is quite different. And the answers they get back are quite different. I think this is something that affects absolutely everybody now. So every kind of company, whether you're B2B, B2C, if you've got anything that you offer, whether it's a service or a product, that's probably over about £100 and requires some level of kind of research, increasingly ChatGPT is going to be a place where people are going to look for to research. And therefore, there's a kind of like realization that if ChatGPT doesn't know who you are, then you're going to lose out on quite a large kind of growing audience. And I think there's also the realization that we are going through an existential kind of shift at the moment, and probably one of the biggest ones I've seen in my lifetime. It's widely recognized as being the fastest tech adoption ever. I've got some stats here about just usage, but I think we all, I'm sure pretty much everyone here on the call is using LLMs to some extent. And the one that kind of sprang out to me on this really was that ChatGPT is already now the 5th most popular website in the world, which kind of gives it some credence of like why. And also just this acknowledgement that organic traffic and websites are likely to decline by 50% by 2028. I actually think it's going to be faster than that. But that's one of the official kind of stats. And what this really means is there's a big change and a big shift for digital marketers and for marketing as a general. So the kind of good old days of everything really being around kind of Google, whether it's organic or paid, so someone going to Google looking for something and then visiting a website to get the information they need has changed where everything's now in the summaries. So the old goal of like ranking number one on Google changes because people aren't using Google so much, but it's getting the recommendation in ChatGPT. And then where it gets really interesting is the things that people, as marketers of old, what we used to use to measure and run our marketing on, which is typically like things like search volume and kind of clicks, website visits and keywords, all completely changes because we're moving to a world where there is 0 clicks and there's no clicks to measure. There's no keywords and data available. So looking at things like share voice, visibility, and sentiment is really key. And we're moving away from individual keywords into more kind of semantic conversations and phrases that people look for. And therefore, what matters increasingly now is like how and what is the AI's perception of your authority, trust, and clarity, and a lot less about what the backlinks and keywords that can help me rank in Google.
Can I jump in there really quickly, Liam? Because Roz has just asked a question, which I was asking myself as well just now. As we move into a generative search, are you saying that websites, or can we say that websites are becoming any less important?
I think the role of a website is changing. Websites are still super important. And actually, we're going through, and I think the next 12 months go through a really interesting shift where at the moment a website sits for something that works for a user hitting it. So the current kind of style of, very minimal design, just clear headers, flow, lots of pretty imagery and stuff works from a user's perspective. What that doesn't work if an LLM is trying to understand that website. So increasingly a website will need to go through a transition of working from a user's perspective if they come to your website, but also work for an LLM to be able to read and understand and get information that we need out of it. So just to give you a quick example, I was doing some work with a car manufacturer recently, and their website was a kind of classic, glitzy, marketing overload website where it talks about elegant features and lots of like really fanciful, fluffy words. But actually nowhere on the website does it mention what the cars are, who they're for, or specifically what the features are. And it's just inferred that because you'll know who the brand is, all this stuff. But the LMs cannot infer who you are, what you do, and what makes you special from the word like elegance and all those kind of like fanciful words. So I think that's going to be really the key is balancing stuff that still works from a consumer's perspective if they're visiting your website, and your potential customer, but also gives the LLMs what they're looking for. And I think probably in a couple of years' time, arguably it'd be more important that they work for the LLMs rather than the users.
So the websites aren't going to go away, but we need to start to build websites for LLMs, just like we sort of built websites for Google, right?
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
we did. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Okay. And then look, I think we're at a really interesting time now because there's definitely some advantages to be had while people kind of catch up in this space. And I'm assuming like a lot of kind of entrepreneurs and people have already shown that kind of like spirit of doing stuff by themselves and trying to get ahead and find competitive advantage. So this is a great space to kind of play in. So yeah, I think if you can get in there early, there's definitely advantages, particularly now while the kind of competition is relatively low. Not many people are optimizing for ChatGPT and the AI models. And you do get a kind of compounding effect because if you can get featured and mentioned now, you're going to kind of become like the training set and training data of the future, which makes it harder for you to be upset by kind of future kind of companies. And a little bit like how SEO worked, where the people who first established themselves in Google, once it established it, it was much harder to knock those kind of people out than for new entrants. So yeah, I do kind of advise thinking about and actually actioning some of this stuff kind of sooner rather than later. So next, I'm just going to quickly go through a few kind of key parts of like what shapes GPT as answers. And this is probably the most important one that, and I think sometimes kind of people forget this sort of stuff, that ChatGPT uses two main sources or places where it gets the information from when it's coming back with an answer. So actually the bulk of it comes from a training set, which is like licensed data that comes from a whole variety of sources, and like Wikipedia, Reddit, Crunchbase, kind of credible news sources, and all sorts of databases and places where it's got licenses for, which is kind of synthesized and created this huge and humongous kind of training data set. But actually that has a cutoff point, which is the interesting part of, at the moment, September of last year. So it's really like knowledgeable of everything up until September of 24. But after there's nothing else in that training set. But if you can that's where the longer term opportunity for brands is to get in those training sets and get in the next training set that ChatGPT will kind of create, because that's really where the authority and kind of trust comes from. But because it's like over a year old, then kind of supplements that with real-time web search. So you probably see within ChatGPT that it looks like it's kind of crawling the web, which it effectively is. So it then tops that up with more up-to-date information. And as part of that kind of process, it determines whether it needs to and to what extent it needs to then top it up. And also the more important bit for all the brands out there is what websites and what information is it going to be useful for that answer. And that's really where the shorter term opportunity is. So like Zabor, for instance, is not in the training data because we're only like 4 or 5 months old, but we will come up in the short term real-time web search because it will check out our website and try and make an understanding of what we do, who we do it for, what makes us special. So a lot of the recommendations are going to focus on this shorter term opportunity because it's where I think brands will see the quickest wins. And then the three levers that matter are the visibility, whether you're mentioned, and sentiment. So the visibility is, look, does ChatGPT even know you exist? So if I type in Zabor into ChatGPT, does he realize that we're a kind of hybrid consultancy agency with a platform helping brands optimize in ChatGPT? But what ChatGPT is asking is, look, do I have clear information and an understanding of this brand and what they do? Which then looks for, which I've listed there, like some key kind of areas it looks for. The next is, look, does it then, if it understands that you exist, does it mention you in answers? What ChatGPT is really asking, look, is this relevant to this specific query that someone's asked? And what is really looking for belief at are the authority markers that say, look, this is an authority and a reputable and trusted source of information in this space. And we've seen like brands where ChatGPT definitely knows they exist and can like quite accurately describe their products and their portfolio and their features, but they don't get answered because it hasn't built up the right levels of authority compared to other competitors. And then the third area, if you are being mentioned, is what's the sentiment and what does it say about you? And I just saw an example this morning of a very well-known gas supplier who does not surprisingly come up in any of the answers. And when you test it, it's because the sentiment is absolutely awful because it's delved into some specific customer reviews that are really scathing of the brand, so it's not featuring. And then what this means, I think, for the people here, and the kind of signals we can start to like play around with is Ryan, you have to like might pop in and like say this.
No, Liam, I believe in you. Come on, you got this.
I can do this. Canonical messaging, which is where you clearly state what you do, who you do it for, and what makes you different. And I can't stress the importance of getting that right, because it's then looking at that same kind of message and consistency. So what we're going to recommend is, look, once you define that, you then start to use that phrase and seed it on your website, particularly the key pages like the homepage, about us page, maybe your product pages. But then you also then use that. It's also looking at pattern matching. So as well as consistency, it's trying to find those same patterns elsewhere. It's not just on your website. It's trying to find them on social media, whether it's on Reddit, if you're doing PR and getting mentions elsewhere. It's looking for those same kind of patterns elsewhere. And the more succinct, clear, and specific you can make that messaging, and more consistent it is everywhere, and the more you can seed that everywhere, the more signals you give the LLMs to basically say, right, there's something in this. This looks credible, and therefore more likely to serve up in an answer when someone asks something.
So just on this, what we're saying here is we need to be super clear about our value proposition, our customer base, and our USPs, and be super consistent with our messaging and the frequency of messaging.
Yeah.
At the moment, are most businesses doing okay, or they're not?
Honestly, I'm surprised actually how bad it is for most businesses. I think, in the old marketing terms, just trying to define a value proposition and be clear on what you do and what the benefit is to a user was tricky, and most brands weren't very good at framing that. But trying to do that in a way where actually you strip out all the kind of marketing like fluff and fluffy language from it to get it into a succinct kind of machine readable and understandable phrase is quite it's not where us humans we're wired. But this is why we've developed this little tool which will provide access to the end, because it gives you put all the inputs and just like free text, write out all the stuff that you can describe your brand and what you do and your customers, etc. It will help you then distill that into something that is kind of more machine readable. And I'll show you some examples as well in that as I go through the deck.
Awesome.
Right, I'll jump into the Abby, I'm just checking how much time I've got, just so I know to whip through this kind of quite quickly.
We'll jump in later, let you know when you've got 5 minutes or so.
Okay, so I'm going to go quite quickly on this, but yeah, we'll share the deck at the end. So here's basically 10 kind of practical steps that you can take. So the first one is probably the one technical one. So this one might be like for the IT people, but the first thing is just to make sure that as a starting point that ChatGPT and the other LLMs can actually crawl and access your website. So there's some stuff there like robot text and some whitelisting that if you ask someone in your IT team or web team to check, they can do so. But one of the key reasons why this stuff's important is specifically if you use Cloudflare, is that Cloudflare changed some of their default settings for new users from the summer, where by default they actually block the LLMs. So like for some companies, in some cases where you're copyrighted material, there's a natural reason why you might want to do that. For most brands, you do want ChatGPT to know who you are and what you do, because otherwise you just won't come up in the answers. But there's also like a pretty simple test you can do to do that, of like just putting like a phrase like, what can you see on this page, with your full URL into ChatGPT and see what it says. And here's like an example. So I can see when I put Zabor in, it's pretty good at like describing what we do. It's clearly got the information from the web page. If you then follow up and say whatever info is available on this website, you can start to see in like that example there, the citations, so particularly here that it's looked at our contact us page, so it's crawled other pages. So there's a simple kind of easy to do test here that anyone can do just to make sure that their website is crawlable. The next is this magical word, this kind of canonical messaging that we've been talking about, and to really get this kind of single precise sentence. So as I said, we've got a tool that will help you kind of do this. For Zabora, we have this one where we say, look, we're a hybrid platform consultancy that measures and optimizes brand's presence in ChatGPT. Then we add like a little proposition at the end, so turning AI visibility into measurable growth. This is the tool we use. But then you want to take that message and basically seed it on your website. So that should go into quite high up on your homepage. It should be on your About Us page, your product pages, and any other kind of key metadata. Like when you're writing your meta titles and descriptions for your key pages, like your homepage, it should be in there as well. And again, this just helps kind of provide that consistency that the LMs are looking for. So here's an example, like on our website. So you've got the homepage, a product page, and what we do page. And you can see that we lead with that kind of Zabora's consultancy and platform pretty consistently on every place in there. So again, it's just reinforcing the key message we want to get across, not having 100 different words of trying to say the same thing, but just getting it into its own distilled key message and just seeding it along the website.
Liam, sorry, just on that, do you have to, you don't have to use the same words, do you? You just have to have the same message, but in different words, phrased differently.
Yeah, you can phrase them differently like we have, but it needs to be similar enough that it's not going to get misinterpreted.
Got it.
So for us, it's like the hybrid platform and consultancy, and then what you do will always be there. But in simple, the key bit is when you said here, like in the approach, so using that simple literal language and just stripping out all the kind of marketing fluff from it. And this is a bit of a mindset shift because most marketers tend to want to find ways of using jazzy language to differentiate something. The LLMs hate that. They just want to know, look, what is it? Who's it for? And what makes it different? Then to help understand like your homepage, it's not actually one of the tips, but we've also created a homepage tool where you can put your homepage in and basically will spit out a report looking at, look, have you structured and got all the right content and structure, including your canonical messaging on your page. So once you've done your messaging, you put it on your website homepage, rerun it through this tool, and it will basically, you should see the differences of like how the LLMs are understanding and representing your brand. But then it's not just your website. You want to take that same messaging and start to seed it on all the other areas publicly available where you can access. So LinkedIn, all your social media kind of channels, any directories that you're part of, any press releases that go out should always, like, part of that brief should always be to mention it. If you're using GitHub, Notion, etc., to include it there. And then also, if you can, just include kind of standardized factual stuff about your company. So factual descriptions of what you do, the company size, the kind of category you're in. Because again, that just helps the LLMs like understand what you do. And so the more you can tell LLMs, this is what we do, this is who we do it for, and the context around that, the better they'll understand you. Because what you're trying to do here is just reduce any ambiguity. And it's difficult, it's harder for smaller brands to do that. But the competitive advantage is that big brands usually are too obsessed about how they come in public and trying to define a canonical messaging. If you're, FTSE 100, probably takes you about 4 weeks because you've got 10 stakeholders, all a different view. The beauty of being entrepreneurs is we can make those kind of decisions quite quickly and action that stuff quickly. And speed is like really key here. You then, like most companies I've seen, need to have structured kind of products and services descriptions where you kind of like clearly list out in much more kind of factual terms what you do. So we would definitely recommend using like product and service pages and having specific pages that you link to from a homepage. There's a little bit of like technical stuff there where you need a schema markup, which again, your IT people should be able to help. But it's basically the schema is something that sits below the website, which you, as a user, you can't see, but it's like some code that tells the LLMs the structure of that page and that information, which allows the LLMs to better understand it. And again, you're just trying to reduce this ambiguity about what you do. So if you haven't got specific product or services pages, I definitely recommend including those on the website. Then one of the things that's already coming out is that ChatGPT and the other AI models absolutely love FAQs, um, because they just like force a succinct question and answer format, which the LLMs find really easy to kind of read and understand. So you need to start using, if you're not already using FAQs, particularly on your homepage. Like we always recommend now dropping them at the bottom of a homepage and almost writing them specifically for the LLMs. So that a user, coming back to the original point, a user goes through, gets the information they need, but at the end, the FAQs distills all the key stuff that ChatGPT needs to see. It doesn't really matter if a user clicks in or not. It should still like read well so they get information. But it should focus on problems you solve, so kind of problem aware questions, solutions you provide, and then specific questions about your product.
Which is basically what a customer wants to see anyway, right?
It is, yeah. But you can in those answers you can go into more depth and you can be much more factual that maybe you wouldn't normally do for if it was user focused. You'd be a bit more kind of polished in the answer. You can just be a lot more like almost technically factual in those answers. But you're right, it should still work for the user, so they should still get the information kind of out from it. So that's what we say, it should be high information density, because it's a great way of not overloading a user if they hit that page with too much information, but allows the LLM agents to get the information that they need. So like this is just an example of we've dropped to the end of, bottom of our homepage. So definitely it's one of the kind of key things in the moment. This might change in time, but it's certainly in the moment, one of the big signals that the LLMs look for is FAQs, because it's just an easy way of getting information to them. Like the next area is like, it's really key to understand how and where your brand currently sits in ChatGPT. So when we're working with clients, this is actually our starting point, is like understanding exactly like, are they visible? And like roughly we see companies fall into one of three categories. They've got those that just do come up. So someone searches something relevant, non-brand related. Like, I don't know, we've just done if someone says who's like, I'm looking for a mortgage, who's the best mortgage provider in the UK? Look, I don't know, Nationwide, NatWest and Co are always going to come up. Mm-hmm. Then you've got those that will sit on the kind of periphery. So they may not come up on, I think with a board game manufacturer. If you type in best game, card game, board game, it's going to be Monopoly, Uno, those kind of games. It's quite difficult to get in there. But you start saying for a family, or you start prefixing it with something slightly more specific, you've got those that then start to kind of creep into the results. And then you've also got those brands that just at the moment aren't kind of coming up. And for those brands, it's really key to understand where and what your niche might be to start getting, and then also to increase and look at your authority and trust indicators, because you need those to be a certain level before you are going to get featured. But there's quite easy ways of just testing this, by asking GPT to summarize your brand and what you offer, and just see whether ChatGPT can accurately describe your products and services. And usually that highlights almost immediately some pretty big gaps. And I've seen some really large well-known companies asking it to summarize a product offering and what products they offer and who for, and there's some just gaps in like the product offerings, which you wouldn't think would be possible, but it has some complete blind spots to it. So I'm not going to go through all these, but in this deck we've got some examples of specific prompts that users, you guys can put into ChatGPT to start to test understanding a brand, your product offering, like where you sit in the category, how accurate the information is, and also just starting to test for some high intent prompts of like where maybe you should be coming up. So you can use these once you've got the deck. And then the next kind of logical progression from that is to start to create a kind of simple prompt taxonomy, which starts to create a series of prompts that looks at different angles of how I can interrogate and test ChatGPT to see whether I come up. So some of these might be problem-based. So I've got this problem, what's the solution? Somebody already know what the solution is. So looking for kind of answers. The most common way people use ChatGPT is for a use case. So it's like I'm looking for X for Y, the best X for Y. So if it's noise cancelling headphones, it's like I'm looking for noise cancelling headphones for commuting or for study, but not just saying like what the best noise cancelling headphones. It's kind of often quite kind of use case specific. So if you kind of usually what we find most businesses is they're quite acutely aware of what the kind of common use cases for their products and services are, but you want to turn those then into a series of prompts to test ChatGPT to see like who's coming up and where and what like the missing associations are and where the positioning is unclear or the optimization is kind of missing. So again, we just got some like top line kind of examples of how that and what that prompt taxonomy like might look like. So examples of problem, solution based, use case, pricing, brand alternatives is a really kind of common one.
Mhm.
So to take, for our games kind of clients, it's taking Uno or Cards Against Humanity, as Ryan said, I think used to play many years ago, and saying, look, what's the best alternative to, or games like, and that's quite often quite revealing, and that's quite a common way that people use the engines. The next thing is you want to understand like how are your competitors kind of coming up in ChatGPT, because this is like really often quite telling of whether they are ahead of you in terms of their optimization and basically what you can do to learn, borrow, beg, and steal from. So yeah, reviewing like how the LMs not to describe your category but your competitors is really key. And then specifically looking at in the answers it comes back with of what are the URLs and sources that the ChatGPT cites when it's talking about your competitor. So that can then help you understand that where are they being featured, what is it that's bringing them up where we're not being featured. And often that can then become like a strategy of, okay, look, these are the 4 sites, whether that's a PR, whether it's like writing content, whether it's outreach to those sites to get mentions. Sometimes it can be awards. Like we've seen like one client, they were struggling against the competitors because actually the competitors, there's a specific award in Australia of all countries where their competitors were entering and winning, and ChatGPT was giving a disproportionate index to the strength of that award win. Their view at the time was like, we've given up on awards because it doesn't get us any more customers or any business. But suddenly it becomes a super strong signal to ChatGPT there's a credibility of this brand because they're winning awards without understanding any of the subtleties of how awards work and the process behind it.
So trying to optimize in an LLM is having basically a real world strategy impact even outside of LLMs.
Yeah, exactly. And there's some of this stuff what we see is what guides the LLMs can be PR is quite a big part of it. So getting the right mentions in the right places. Some of it can be customer outreach. We saw a good example for a well-known kind of bank that some of the negative criticisms that ChatGPT was like citing actually stemmed from, believe it or not, a single post on Facebook where I think Which had published a report of like best mortgages of 2024. One person said, don't use this brand, it's rubbish, customer service is rubbish, this is bad for this, bad for that. And ChatGPT had almost copied verbatim a single post from Facebook. Then
Wow.
presented it as, look, this is almost like
Wow.
a universal like view of like why not, or what some customers are saying. Well, obviously it's just one person, and the nature of social media stuff is always going to be people saying positive and negative. But if you can understand that and understand the reference point, that can then become a brief, or you just basically reach out to the customer to try and say, look, can you either change it, take it down, or you respond to it at least. But yeah, it's quite key. But if you can start to see, like, I've got an example here of there's a kind of GO tool called Profound that's raised a lot of money. So not really a competitor, a pure competitor of ours because they're a pure play SaaS platform. But just understanding like where they come up, what if I type into GBT, are we better than as a geo option than Profound? It's quite interesting looking at where and what it's sourcing information from. So I can see it goes to our website, but I can also see some specific like articles, like and who's written them. And I can see that Nick Lafferty is actually someone who works at Profound. So I can start to understand like how I can like start to increase my kind of competitive advantage over them, and what kind of content I might create. So if ChatGPT is looking for things like most affordable alternatives to profound, that's a piece of content I might create on my website. And I might start doing kind of competitive reviews or doing top 10 geo tools in 2025 or top 10 geo tools for SMEs or for in fintech or and finding lots of different kind of niche ways, depending on who my customers are, to kind of create that content. But it's revealing, and often brands who are closer will start to understand then, and often usually it kind of the penny drops. Okay, I know now where I need to be focusing my messaging and my kind of content play.
Awesome.
And then the final one is to engage with like the kind of the high signal communities. So ChatGPT in particular is quite notorious for relying really heavily on Wikipedia and Reddit.
Reddit.
I park Wikipedia because it's probably a different kind of conversation and not an easy one, just the way Wikipedia works to take action on. But Reddit is something that anybody can quite easily just go on and to join. And I think the reasons for that are probably fairly obvious. That ChatGPT has to find mass sources of so-called credible information, and therefore real life, real humans debating and talking and discussing stuff is considered quite high up on that priority. I'm going to park now on my Reddit. Like I spend quite a bit of time on Reddit, and I would question the validity of a lot of the stuff I see on there. But for the LLMs at the moment, Reddit in particular is held in high regard, which then creates a nice opportunity for brands because it's quite easy to post on Reddit. But as I said at the bottom of this slide, you have to tread really carefully when doing so, because what you do want to do is kind of create useful, value add, authoritative led answers, definitely not sales pitches, in a way where you are going back to that kind of core messaging stuff. You're seeding what you do, but you're not coming across as being, like salesy or kind of spammy, where you're likely to get kind of more penalized, either like ripped to shred by the Reddit community, or what LM is just going to see as a kind of piece of spam. So when I wrote this slide first, now I'll be honest, completely honest, I hadn't actually posted anything in Reddit at that point in time. And I thought, I can't show this having not done it. So yesterday I did my first Reddit post, which I'm going to share here as an example of, I think, how to do this well, to do it right. So this was like, actually, I forgot, should have added the actual original kind of question, but it was someone asking basically what a good competitor was to one of the tools, and do they really need to kind of create their own prompts?
Yeah.
So this was like, literally an answer that I put into into Reddit, which, if you notice, the beginning mentions our brand name, and we have our kind of a crude version of like iconical messaging. But where this answer was like value driven, showed like expertise and kind of an understanding of the market, wasn't salesy, where we mentioned the brand, but in a kind of transparent, non-disclosure way, included some of the kind of iconical messaging, acknowledged the competitors, but we didn't deliberately just rubbish them, but was written in a kind of natural style. So this stuff kind of works in Reddit. Saying, "Oh, just use Zabora, we're much better, and everyone else is rubbish," doesn't work.
So what I'm sort of picking up on, and I do want to get to questions now because we've got some really good questions coming in. But as long as we're kind of mindful about how LLMs work, then essentially, I mean, I feel like my behavior is going to change on Reddit and on how I write websites and how I write blogs, just if I have that level of understanding of what this is going to do to an LLM or for an LLM.
100%. And that's what hopefully some of the kind of key takeouts of this are is, look, there's this big shift because we're going from machines reading your posts on Reddit, your website, where historically it's all been like, humans reading it. So, and as I say, we need this transition where stuff can work in both cases. So if you read, we're all reading this post now, it all makes sense, and I see the value in it, and I'm not thinking, right, that's really spammy, or someone's just like drop that in there because they're just trying to sell their services. But it's actually also giving the LLMs exactly the same but it was actually written for the LLMs, not for humans.
Got it. Awesome. Liam, I definitely want to take questions. But okay, I think you're going to share the deck. We can get the
Yeah.
deck there.
Let me quickly like do two
Yeah.
things. So right, there's a QR code here, which if you snap should take you to a link where there's a little form where we'll do the homepage audit for you, but also then give you the link to this deck. I need to clarify that the homepage audit we're just tweaking, so that'll be like available later today. But you can still fill out the form, and we'll just email the report when it's ready. Or you can use this URL here for those who like to type stuff in. You can always email me at liam@zabor.io if you've got any questions or you've got any problems with any of the tools. Also, you can just check me out on LinkedIn. Then once you've done the homepage audit, we will send you a separate link to do the canonical messaging. And the reason why we split those out is the canonical messaging needs a bit more info from you. And it's a bit overloading to say, right, if you want the slide deck, here's like loads of stuff you have to fill out about your brand. Not everyone might be interested in it. But if you do the homepage audit first, then we'll send you a link which allows you access to the canonical tool. That will also be probably later today, maybe tomorrow, but that's free. But if you fill out that form initially, you'll be in our system and you'll get access to both the tools.
I want to make sure you've got space for me for that and for Growth Studio because I think we'll definitely be doing that. Liam, yeah, this is a lot more complex and interesting, and weirdly enough, it's a lot more logical. The whole thing kind of makes a lot more sense than I thought it was going to. It's very doable, essentially, is where I'm going with this. Should we jump on a few questions, Sonia? Because I can
Yes.
see some really interesting ones coming in.
I know. I was just reading through them. First of all, thanks, Liam. I want to get on this right away for Grow Studio. I don't know about you, Ryan, but I want to
Oh
do
yeah.
it right away now. Okay, on to questions. Just while we finished off on Reddit, there's a couple of questions around content. So if things like Reddit and so forth kind of influence, do also things like blog and social media captions and content in general affect this functionality?
They do, but I'd say to a lesser extent.
Mm,
Uh, like if I was starting fresh, I would start with my existing website
okay.
and I'd look at particularly the homepage, about us page, and the product pages, and I'd get those like ship shape first. So I'd figure out all the messaging and like what do I want to tell the LMs, and those are the key pages initially. It's going to start on. There's a lot of like I'd say suspect kind of like advice about just creating loads of content in the same way as SEO was like 10 years ago. Just because you create content doesn't mean that Google's going to like index you and
Yeah.
feature you in the results. If the LMs can't understand what you fundamentally do, who you do it for, what makes you different, three things I'm going to keep saying because it's the heart of all this. It's not going to reference some article on the blog.
Mm,
But on the blog stuff, also to do that well, if once the LMs do understand what you do, what we advise and guide is to create that content under something that's like a guides or how to, not just put it under like a random blog, because the LMs are looking for signals that say, look, here's almost a pillar of content and content around it, which is actually quite similar to SEO and how SEO worked. Not here's a blog with one article is about this and another article is about something completely different. So if you are creating new content, it's better to focus that in a URL structure that might be set under a guides or how to or something else. I would actually focus on likes of Reddit first, because I think you're going to get more and quicker payback by seeding information on Reddit from LMs. But actually, if you want to do it well, what you can do is create a piece of content so you then seed into Reddit.
Mm.
So I could go back to the article here, and I could easily now create an article about prompt taxonomies, for instance, which is not something that people really talk about much in this world, but actually so important to the understanding of how you appear in ChatGPT, and then reference that article in from my Reddit post. So
I talk about prompt taxonomies all the time,
yeah.
Liam. Probably because of that's why I'm single. But really quickly, just on that. So there was a question from Michael around kind of content. Does it have to be visible, or can we kind of hide it in the HTML schema?
You should definitely have stuff in the schema, but it needs to be like on your page.
Okay,
So there's that kind of schema and markup, which is like the invisible stuff where it does need to be in, but you don't want to try and game the system, and it's not like the old style of SEO where you might have tiny text in white fonts so you can't see it, but it's got all your keywords stuffed in there. You just still It's still looking for kind of credibility.
Mm.
Uh, and obviously, this is quite a fast changing, moving space. So what might work now probably won't work in 6 months' time. But our recommendation was to do everything that's above board, not trying to kind of that purely game the system. But the
makes sense.
FAQs is the perfect way to seed in a lot of content in a way where you're not overloading the user if they hit their website.
Yeah.
That's interesting because you were just mentioning about also maybe in 6 months' time. And actually, someone came in and asked, where do you see this changing in the next 12 months or even 5 years if we can think that far?
Oh
5 years,
God, big
hopefully.
question.
Yeah.
Big question.
Hopefully. Look, I think the two key things that like almost inevitably say ChatGPT are going to launch, and they've just started actually already to do this, is the shopping side,
Mm.
which obviously not going to affect everybody, but if you're more in the e-commerce space, that you'll be able to buy stuff directly. And in fact, we've seen even this week, it's quite crude, but there's a new shopping tool that they've released that I think is trying to like capitalize on the whole Black Friday. And it's almost inevitable there's going to be some form of advertising engine in there. I think the really interesting thing is going to be how Google responds to all this, because probably 12 months ago for the first time, like I can remember thinking, Jesus, Google actually might struggle here because of his shift. They've clearly come out fighting with Gemini, and actually Gemini 3.5, I think launched recently, is getting really good reviews.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And obviously, if you use Google, you see the AI summaries and increasingly AI modes being pushed. So Google are finding all their different ways around this. I think there's going to be an interesting battle. Like I literally can't tell you what I think.
Mm.
And I think that's one of the challenges of this, which is kind of why I think it's really like why I know that we're going to be working with Zabora, which is we need to be on top of this. And I know we at Grow Studio, like many other businesses, we can't be on top of this. We need to have a network, a partner in our network who can do this for us. Liam, there's a lot of questions coming in around FAQs. I just want to kind of frame them together, right? Um, one of the questions was Charlotte Ann Fiddler. Charlotte Ann asks, and I was wondering this. I get the fact that you need to kind of now develop FAQs for LLMs. Makes sense, and because it kind of really clarifies the canonical messaging. But what about things like shipping and returns and the common customer questions? They still have value. And just if you kind of want to follow that on with, should you just have one set of FAQs, or can you have like multiple FAQs throughout the website? And that's by We Are Civitas.
That's a good question. And again, this is this human versus machine conundrum. So what I recommend is you have somewhere between 5 and 8 FAQs on your homepage. Do you think about those from the LLM perspective? But if you know you've got something that customers are always asking you and is always the number one, like specific stuff around postage, shipping, all that kind of stuff, that you do include that in that summary of FAQs on your homepage. But then separately, you have like an FAQ, a master FAQ section, where you can have all the kind of customer queries and stuff that customers may ask her. And then the way to do that, so you have your homepage, you have your 7 or 8 FAQs, then you then have a link at the bottom of that to your master FAQ section. So if I have more questions, go here. Then that just takes them to your FAQ page where you've got the full list. And that then can be much more kind of human and user and consumer led.
Hmm.
That's good to know because I also see them. There's a few questions that are also kind of specific to their own website. I'm wondering if that's something from going through your audit tool and having your contact details, they could probably get more clarity on.
Yeah, sure. The tool, once we've tweaked it and finalized it, will should help. It's really good at just giving you a view of like what's good and what could be
What's,
improved.
yeah. No,
Um,
amazing.
and then yeah, look, if people got some specific questions, want some help with it, you've got my email address there.
Yeah.
So yeah, just feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to kind of to help out and stuff.
Can I just jump in with two like super final questions, which I just looked at and I think they're super relevant. Um, the first one, it doesn't matter who posts on Reddit, right? As long as there's content about you and it's linked to you, like Reddit's not going to say, "Oh, hang on, this is Liam's business and Liam's posting," and therefore down and rank it lower.
No, Wikipedia would do that, which is why I haven't mentioned Wikipedia.
And that's the complication we're talking about.
Yeah,
Okay.
so apparently the average lifespan of a new business on Wikipedia is about 25 minutes. You go on there and set up a business, or someone else sets up a new business for you. It's
Okay.
usually taken down within about 25, 30 minutes. And it's almost impossible if there's a new business to get a Wikipedia citation because you need a certain level of fame and credibility to do so.
Got
Like
it.
just a profound, like the big tool I mentioned. I mean, they've raised something like £50 million and they haven't got a, they're in this space and they haven't got a Wikipedia page. But on
Okay.
Reddit, you can, anyone can post. And you can go,
Got it.
when you set up a username, I'm called like Left Turn. It can be quite anonymous. But my advice on Reddit is, depending on if you have never used Reddit before, is don't just jump in and start posting.
Mm,
Find the relevant kind of communities or subreddits and just read them for a week or so and get a feel for the style and the tone, what works and what people are responding to. Then just soft seed it. So my example here was to be honest, was my experiment of just soft seeding and playing around with Reddit because I know I need to be doing this stuff. I can't just preach it and not do it.
Yeah. I mean, I was reading that and I was reading that with a little bit of a critical view because I was wondering, is Liam going to oversell here, right? Because I think that'd be, and you didn't, as far as I'm concerned, because I think that's a mistake people make on Reddit, where they go in with a hard sell, and that's not what Reddit's about.
Yeah.
But and my last question is actually from Roz, because this has been on my mind for a while. A lot of the text we're seeing online, and therefore a lot of the text that's being referenced by these LLMs, are generated by the LLMs in the first place. What does that mean? Is this going to be a drawback? Is this an advantage? Are these LLMs kind of filtering out so their own language? How's this like essentially it's just feeding itself now, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I mean that's there's a big that's a big question, and it's a really good one and a really interesting one about that increasingly as we're using LMs to generate content, that content then goes into the web sphere and the LMs then pick it up. Are they just then resynthesizing their own material? Um, Look, there's no perfect answer to that, but what I think are seeing already is that it is quality over quantity. So if you're just like generating, purely using LLMs to generate content en masse, which a lot of companies are starting to do so, you might get in the short term, you might get a bit of an advantage to it, but very quickly you'd probably be penalised for it because the last thing the world needs is tons of content. But what it does look for is that uniqueness. So there's certain like formats, like the question and answer, the comparison table, the FAQs that it likes because it's an easy way of getting the right information. But it's also then looking at all the extra layers that say, right, this is credible. So, like a good example, you're much better off as we've just started doing our kind of content, publishing like a white paper, which might be quite long. It might take like a couple of days or a week to do. Than you are spamming out 100 like random kind of pages.
And this ties into why you were saying why the how-tos are so useful because
Yeah.
that is genuinely useful content.
Yeah.
Liam, there's so many more questions, and if what I'm going to do, if it's okay with you, is I'm going to spend a bit more time with you this week and just kind of get the answers to these, and we can maybe share these online or share these via our channels on LinkedIn. But I think thank you very, very much for what is obviously a massive, massive topic that you managed to shrink down to an hour for us.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. It's a fascinating space. This one, I mean, it's impossible to cover all of it in any real depth, but I'm hoping that everyone's got at least one or two key things they can do. Listen, I definitely recommend using the two tools we developed. And also, if you get a link of this deck, just going back to some of the like the prompt taxonomy examples and actual prompt examples, and just starting to play around. But yeah, no, so I love startup founders and small businesses and the David versus Goliath. So yeah, wish everyone the best, and look, reach out if you need any help.
Well, I
Awesome.
was gonna add, Ryan, actually, with the questions that we're missing, it might be worth including into the email we'll send to everyone. So for anyone that we've missed, don't
Perfect.
worry. Share that with Liam right away. And I think it'd be nice to kind of create a package for everyone. So
Liam, do you want one more chance to say canonical?
Cool.
Thank you all very, very much for joining.
Yeah,
yes,
thanks everyone. Good
thank you
luck.
so
Okay.
much. Have a lovely rest of your days, everyone. Bye.